Welcome to our Savvy series. I'm Catherine Magaña here with Rachel Ivanovich. And today we're going to have a discussion on protecting independence. So let's talk about independence, real independence, and not just about having money or being successful, but it's really about having control, access, and choice. And so one of the things,
every stage of life.
Right? I know
Yes.
There's a lot of moving parts, especially every year and everything changes. But I think it's important that we do revisit liquidity and access to cash, as well as estate planning control and planning for decision-making capacity later in life. So we'll kind of touch on all those different areas, which we think is really important. We're big on helping women be independent and educate. And so this is kind of real in line with kind of our philosophy and with our what we do with Savvy Women.
And there's a big difference between wealth on paper and money that you can actually use.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've seen a lot is where some women that, you have a lot of money in real estate and
I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, and you have equity in your home, or maybe you have money tied up in retirement assets, which you can eventually have access to, but there's tax consequences. There's a lot more to it.
I've seen a lot of clients just build up a real estate portfolio, multiple rentals, or they want to pay off their house, make sure they have that, because that makes you feel secure. But then you're house rich and cash poor. And what I've seen with a lot of clients as well is with those multiple rental properties, when they go to sell it to access the cash, then there's a huge tax event. And so, not saying that you shouldn't invest in real estate because real estate can be great, but at the same time, you want to be sure that you're planning ahead.
And having a reserve or some money set aside. Because even with some of the properties, there are things that come up.
Repairs.
Plumbing
Huge
or
repairs.
roof or something major, like you mentioned.
Right, and if you need cash quickly, putting the house on the market and, maybe there's, 2-3 months before it actually sells and that you have access to that cash. So you definitely want to plan ahead.
Yeah. And then potentially there could be something that you're not even thinking about, or whether if there's a change in relationship or divorce or a health event, or if there's something you need to help a family member or something comes up that you really weren't expecting, so you want to be able to have that money set aside. It was interesting. We worked with a client many years ago where she went through a divorce. She actually came to us after the divorce, and she had the house. And so she was really happy that she had the house that they had together for many years. But the reality is on that house was there was still a mortgage and the upkeep, and it was too expensive to keep. And so eventually she made some decisions and downsized. But once again, sometimes you think I want the house, but the reality is, okay, well, when you're going through a situation, what's the overall picture and how are you going to cover some of the costs that come along with that?
So I think one of the questions you need to be asking yourself is, if something unexpected happens tomorrow, how easily can you actually access cash without asking for permission or disrupting your long-term plan? And so do you have that emergency reserve?
Which is important. I think that's one of the things. Usually it's 3 to 6 months. 3 months if you have kind of steady income, 6 months if your income kind of fluctuates, but definitely having some money set aside for those emergencies, as well as for, even if there's loss of income for a few.
So maybe having
months.
a tiered liquidity strategy is good.
Yeah. So definitely something to look at when we look at your financial plan. And then another area is kind of the estate planning and control. So let's kind of move on to that. And I think it's more about having control while you're alive. And I know sometimes estate planning, what we find is, you feel like it's a morbid conversation. I know it's a morbid conversation, but the reality is it is having your wishes and taking control while you're alive and making sure everything's set up for your family and your beneficiaries.
And think of it as maybe an act of self-advocacy. Yeah. So you're actually in control of your money and your situation. But one of the issues that we often see is outdated trustees or ex-spouses on estate planning documents.
Or beneficiaries.
Exactly. So it's important to be reviewing these documents, I don't know, on an annual basis, or especially when a big life event happens, marriage, a divorce, a child is born.
Yeah. Or even for us, from my family, when we did our trust, I think we did like 5 or 6 years ago, our kids were a lot smaller at the time. And so we were thinking, all these stipulations and this and that. And now as they're getting older,
who's the guardian going to be?
And now as they're getting older, I think the twins are now 17. I'm thinking, well, okay, let's we've talked about revisit that, because I now that I they're a little older and I know they're responsible. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make you wait all these years.
Right. Or maybe your children aren't responsible and you set up the trust when they were younger and you've set it up and thinking when they are 18, they'll be ready for the responsibility,
and they're not.
But maybe they're not. And maybe you have multiple children and some are and some aren't. So definitely, as they age and mature, making those shifts and change that are appropriate.
Well, as we talk about having, if there's a divorce, an ex-spouse, I actually met with somebody recently and she was letting me know that her and her ex-spouse are really close and friendly and they actually want each other as the beneficiaries still. So it's just kind of, you don't always hear that. But
it's a case-by-case situation.
So I think that, like you said, it is reviewing, but there are certain circumstances where.
So why is it you think that most women delay reviewing their estate plans?
I think it's the idea of there's an end or I don't.
It's overwhelming too.
Yeah, and I think it just, you feel like it's going to take a lot of time. And I think that's where having a good team in place, obviously there's estate planning attorneys that you can work with and professionals. And obviously I think being educated and knowing what's the impact of not having something in place. And so I think by knowing, if you kind of lay that out, like this is going to cost XYZ, or this is a tax impact, or this is what's going to happen. And then we recently had a conversation with a woman who we were asking, okay, well, what if something happens down the line? Like, your family's all on the East Coast? Are you going to stay here or move? And so
she didn't even want to think about it.
I know. She's like, well, because she's in good health. But she's like, but then the reality is she's like, you're right. I probably need, I have an idea of what I want, but I don't really have it all laid out.
Well, it wasn't in writing either.
No.
And so if all of a sudden you're incapacitated, you want people to know what your wishes are. So I think just kind of a strategic takeaway is make sure you're reviewing your trustees, your powers of appointment, the beneficiary language in your wills and trusts, and then aligning your estate documents with your current values because different seasons bring different things. Family dynamics change. And then, of course, your independence and your goals may change throughout your life.
And like you mentioned, the power of attorney on health and who's going to take help with something, take care of you if you need help later.
Because the person who you want making your healthcare decisions might be different than who makes your financial decisions.
Yeah. And so I think and then even the health decisions are, even from my family, we've gone through, and I've kind of shifted a little bit over the years.
Have you?
In that originally I was like, okay, if something happens to me, I keep me alive, and I know I'm going to come back, and I keep me on life support, and I'm a fighter, and But the reality is, as I've gotten aged a little bit, and I've seen disease and things happen, I realized, okay, well maybe there might be a point where it's time, and I'm still, and those are the hard conversations. It's like
such hard conversations.
It's like, wait a minute, and everybody is different in what they want. Some people, like I said, they say, okay, at some point, this is what my wishes are.
But you don't want your loved ones to have to make those decisions in the heat of the moment.
And that's why there's the planning documents and power of attorneys in place.
And make sure you're doing them also for your children who are over 18 because they are adults once they turn 18. So make sure you have financial power of attorney, healthcare directive once they turn 18. It's important.
Right. And so as we're making all these kind of decision making, once again, having all of your directives in order, clear communication, having people know where the documents are is part of it too. It's not just having the documents, but also knowing where they're at and having those trusted individuals in your family or people that you care about be aware of your wishes. And so we know there's a lot of decisions, and that's, obviously we're here.
It's a sensitive topic.
Yeah. And we're obviously here to help talk through and guide, and there's financial, impacts for some of this as well.
But the risks if you don't choose in advance are, the courts will decide, or there's a lot of family conflict, or loss of autonomy. So you definitely want to have these discussions while you still have capacity. And before you're vulnerable. Yeah.
And you rather be proactive than reactive. And so that's obviously, we thought it was important as we're kind of here in the beginning of the year and just kind of thinking of the year. We always think it's important to make sure you have your plans, everything's in order. And if you are interested, we're happy to collaborate or talk through some of this with you. We do offer a complimentary strategy call or session. and you can reach us at 760-692-5700. And we know we covered a lot, and we're happy you can join us. We are excited, before we wrap up, though, is we do have an event coming up. So that's going to be in February, and that's going to be on February 25th at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce. Yes. So
and this is a brand new event.
It is.
We were trying to create a strong community of women who are like-minded, who want to get together and learn and share from each other. It will be interactive, so I hope you'll come. We're really excited for it.
So it's her financial year, and we're going to do vision boards and content and just kind of come together.
And focus on finance.
Yes.
Because oftentimes you'll put together a vision board and, a vision for your future, but we want to align it with your money and wealth and your goals.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to join us, once again, it's February 25th at 4:30 at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce.
And so kind of closing, our call to action for you is make sure you're revisiting your liquidity. We talked about that. Review your estate planning documents and confirm your decision-making plans and check in with your advisors.
Thanks.
Build your team.
Absolutely. So we appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for getting savvy today about your finances. And remember to savvy up. Please stay tuned for important disclosures. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results, and the indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Savvy Woman Wealth Management is a registered investment advisor with the SEC.